The chair now recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has been one of the more interesting panels. This is probably the fourth or fifth panels that we've had on this subject, and as one of the two engineers in Congress, it's a fascinating dialogue about all of this. In fact, we're going to have a conference this fall back in the district over this subject because we want to explore this further. But I do have some issues or concerns that perhaps go beyond this legislation, because I have all the confidence that we will develop a bipartisan approach that'll develop this. But I'm looking at maybe from 30,000 feet perhaps on something. And Mr. Bainwalk, maybe goes back to you. One of your charts that you put up showed that there was an increase in accidents or deaths in the last few years. Can you just give me a real short version of what's caused that uptick in numbers?
So there has been a tick up, and it's beyond VMT. We have looked at it preliminarily, and we can't give you a totally conclusive explanation, but there are a number of factors that are clear. One is distraction. We think it's about 10% of the challenge. It's also older drivers and older cars. There's an enormous correlation between the age of the car.
If I could jump in on that, because that's really where I wanted to go, is if we have available technology right now to address some of that, with seatbelt legislation, possibly glare-proof windshields, breathalyzers that we can use, why aren't the manufacturers using that as the first step instead of taking this giant leap over into automated cars?
Well,
is it the cost? Because that's what when I talk to the auto dealers, that's what they tell me. People can't afford all of these provisions.
There are a range of factors. One is cost. The price of a vehicle has gone up fairly dramatically. Much of that is related to compliance, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to afford. So that's part of it. But there's also the question of what the end result of the investment is. And in my oral, I showed that pyramid. And the existing challenge that relates to the car is 1%. 99% has nothing to do with the car. With self-driving, you can deal with the totality of the problem. And so the prize there is critical.
Okay, given again the time frame here, we have this constraint on it. So we talked a little bit about costs, and we haven't as a board or as a panel here, we haven't really gotten into that other than I've asked that in the previous groups about what's the cost, and everyone says they'll get back to me, and I'm going to say 3 months later, no one's gotten back to me, because what I was raising the question was, this has to increase the cost to a household, and for a family in Connecticut or Maryland that has a $70,000 annual house, that's their average in Maryland, but in Mississippi it's barely $37,000. How are people supposed to afford newer cars, especially when you also looked at one of your charts that you talked about the older the car, the more liable there's going to be a problem with it. So how are we going to do this? Is your business, do you think the automobile's business plan, their strategy here, maybe call your business case, is assuming that ultimately we're going to go to some kind of subsidy or tax credits for consumers to be able to have an automobile?
That's not part of any strategy.
Do you think that could ultimately lead to this? Because if they're going to increase cost of the cars, how are they going to be able to do that or maintain them? Keeping in mind that many states across the country don't even have automobile inspections. Now we're going to put this very sophisticated car on the highway without any inspection of that car.
The early phase of adoption will be through services like Uber and Lyft and Chariot and Maven. And because of that, the cost to the consumer will actually be lower than today's use of the vehicle. Down the road, as the technology matures, the price point will drop. So the blend of access versus ownership models will evolve. But the first experience, as I think Tim alluded to, will be through the ride-sharing application, and there the cost will be low.
So Do you, just for the record, you don't think that the automobile industry is ever going to ask for some subsidy or tax credit so that so new buyers will be able to acquire an automobile with this kind of automation with it?
I've never been part of a conversation where the concept has been broached.
All right, well, I am curious about it because I don't know how, there's a reason that there are older cars on the highway that people can't afford them, and now we're going to impose this new standard. Again, I'm fascinated with it. I think it's where we're going to be, but I'm still hung up a little bit on how we get to there from a macro view. And we'll take care of the regulations on that, but how's it going to affect our economy, let alone, as Schakowsky mentioned earlier, 4.1 million people losing their jobs that are drivers. I'm really curious about the big scheme. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Thank you very much, gentlemen's time has expired, and the chair now